History holds many puzzles, but few as strange as the man who stepped into the world without warning, without parents, without a past. This mysterious figure appears in one of the oldest parts of the Bible, breaks every rule of storytelling, and vanishes like morning mist. Some believe he was a heavenly being, or perhaps Jesus himself in an early form. His name? Melchizedek. For hundreds of years, this shadowy king-priest has made scholars scratch their heads in wonder. What makes a character who appears for just a moment in Genesis so important that he's still discussed today? If you enjoy this journey into ancient mystery, please hit the like button, share this video with friends who love biblical puzzles, and subscribe to our channel. Your support helps us bring more hidden stories to light. Picture this: ancient kings battle across the dusty Middle East. The fighting is fierce. Then, without any warning, a figure steps onto the page of history. No introduction, no family tree, no backstory. He simply exists. We find ourselves in Genesis 14. Abram, later renamed Abraham, has just won a great battle. As he returns home, this stranger appears. The Bible calls him Melchizedek, king of Salem and priest of God Most High. Without speaking a word, he gives Abram bread and wine, blesses him, and receives a tenth of Abram's goods. Then, just as suddenly as he came, he's gone. No further details, no family history, nothing. This brief meeting has sparked endless questions. Who was this man? Where did he come from? Why was he important enough to be included in the story? For hundreds of years, these questions remained largely unanswered. Everything changed in 1947. Hidden in caves near the Dead Sea, ancient scrolls were found that had been hidden for nearly 2,000 years. Among these treasures was a scroll called 11Q13, the Melchizedek scroll. This scroll painted a picture of Melchizedek not as a mere man, but as a heavenly figure with world-changing powers. One striking passage reads, "This is the day of peace on which he, Melchizedek, will carry out judgment upon the sons of God, and he will deliver them from the hand of Belial." 11Q13, column 2. Here, Melchizedek appears as a divine judge who saves the righteous and punishes Belial, the enemy of God. The Essenes, the group who wrote these scrolls, believed Melchizedek would act as an Elohim, a divine being, at the end of time. They saw him as the one who would announce the final Jubilee, a time when all debts are forgiven and all captives set free. But the mystery doesn't end at Qumran, where the Dead Sea Scrolls were found. Scattered throughout ancient writings are mentions of a book of Melchizedek. Though this book hasn't survived whole, the pieces we have show Melchizedek as an eternal judge living in heaven, knowing all things and able to change human destiny. Some scholars think he might be like the Archangel Michael. Others see him as a preview of the Messiah, who would come later. Think about that. A figure who serves as priest before the Bible even creates a priesthood, who Abram respects deeply and who later writings describe as a cosmic power. Who or what was Melchizedek? The meeting between Abram and Melchizedek seems small, almost hidden in a war story, but it contains one of the Old Testament's greatest mysteries. In Genesis 14, Melchizedek carries two titles that should never belong to one person: King of Salem and Priest of God Most High. Salem is likely an early name for Jerusalem, the future holy city. But at this point in history, Jerusalem wasn't yet Israel's spiritual center. Israel didn't even exist yet. So what did it mean to be king of this city? Even more puzzling, how could he be a priest of Abram's God before the law was given, before the Exodus happened, before the Levites were chosen, and before the tabernacle was built? The priesthood hadn't been created yet. The bread and wine he offers carry deep meaning too. Centuries later, Jesus would use these same elements at the Last Supper to represent a new agreement between God and humanity. Was this just chance, or was it planned from the beginning of time? There's another detail many readers miss. Melchizedek blesses Abram, and Abram accepts this blessing. In the ancient world, this was deeply meaningful. Only a greater person could bless a lesser one. Abram, the father of faith and God's chosen man, accepts Melchizedek as his spiritual superior. There's no conversation, no long exchange, just quiet actions that speak volumes. This was no ordinary man. He carried authority that came from above, not from earth. Genesis doesn't explain Melchizedek, but it leaves the impression that the writer knew exactly how important this figure was and deliberately left clues in plain sight for careful readers. This priest wasn't there by accident. He breaks the normal flow of history. Centuries pass. Melchizedek's name fades from scripture, almost forgotten, until suddenly he reappears. This time in a royal prophecy written by David, Israel's greatest king. In the mysterious Psalm 110, David writes, "The Lord has sworn and will not change his mind. You are a priest forever, in the order of Melchizedek." Psalm 110:4. This statement is extraordinary. David himself, though king and prophet, had no connection to the priesthood. Yet he points to an eternal priesthood of a different, older, mysterious order, one that existed before Israel's religion was even founded. Why Melchizedek? Of all the names in sacred history, why would David mention this character who appeared once and vanished without explanation? The answer lies between the lines. Psalm 110 is one of the strongest Messiah prophecies in the Old Testament. It describes a future king-priest sitting at God's right hand, ruling with justice and defeating his enemies in final judgment. This figure wouldn't come from Aaron's priestly line, but from a higher order, the order of Melchizedek. In other words, Melchizedek becomes a heavenly pattern, a model of eternal priesthood without beginning or end. David was pointing to something or someone far greater than he fully understood. This single powerful mention lifted Melchizedek from an obscure character to a prophetic key connecting the old and new, the earthly and eternal. More than 1,000 years after David, Melchizedek's name appears again, this time in one of the New Testament's most deep and mysterious books, the letter to the Hebrews. And here, he isn't just mentioned, he's explained. Hebrews chapter 7 does something bold. It uses Melchizedek to prove that Jesus doesn't need the Levitical priesthood to have spiritual authority. He belongs to an older, higher, and eternal order. The writer highlights disturbing facts about Melchizedek with surgical precision. Without father or mother, without family tree, without beginning of days or end of life, resembling the Son of God, he remains a priest forever. Hebrews 7:3. Stop and think about that. This isn't normal symbolic language. It's saying Melchizedek had no recorded human origin or known end, something true of no other biblical figure. There's no mention of his birth, death, family, or children. He appears outside of time and stays that way. But the most interesting detail is the phrase resembling the Son of God. This suggests he isn't the Son himself, but an image pointing to him. Like a framework built before Christ came to reveal an endless priesthood. The writer also emphasizes that Abram, the father of faith, gave 1/10 of everything to Melchizedek, and that Levi, ancestor of all Jewish priests, still in Abram's body, symbolically paid tribute to Melchizedek too. In other words, even the Jewish priests acknowledged Melchizedek's superiority. Hebrews 7 transforms what seemed like a minor figure into a central piece of New Testament teaching. Melchizedek becomes the link between ancient revelation and Christ's eternal priesthood. But an unavoidable question arises. If he was made like the Son of God, who or what made him so? Was he a temporary divine appearance, a heavenly being, or a symbolic figure left by God as a sign of something greater to come? 3 theories about Melchizedek. Faced with such an unusual figure who defies categories, family trees, and even the laws of time, many attempts have been made to explain who Melchizedek was. Among various religious ideas and ancient traditions, 3 theories have stood out over the centuries. Theory 1. Melchizedek was Shem, Noah's son. This idea is common among Jewish teachers and commentators. It's based on the fact that Shem lived many years after the Great Flood, long enough to be alive during Abram's time. As Noah's direct descendant, Shem would have known the true God, which could explain his spiritual authority before Moses received God's law. However, this theory hits a major roadblock in the biblical text. Hebrews states that Melchizedek was without genealogy, something that doesn't apply to Shem, whose family line is clearly recorded in Genesis. So while this idea might work with the timeline, it conflicts with the heart of the mystery. Theory 2. Melchizedek was a theophany, God appearing in human form. This view, supported by many Christian teachers throughout history, is even bolder. After all, who else could be described as without father, without mother, without beginning of days or end of life? This would also explain why he offers bread and wine, symbols that point strongly to Christ, and why he receives tithes from Abram, showing spiritual superiority. However, once again, Hebrews offers an important detail. It doesn't say Melchizedek is the son of God, but that he was made like the Son of God. This choice of words suggests he isn't Christ himself, but rather a type, a reflection, a prophetic shadow. If he were a direct appearance of the Messiah, as happens in other Old Testament divine visits, the text would likely make that clearer. Theory 3. Melchizedek was simply a righteous man. This is perhaps the most logical and historically reasonable view. The Bible records other examples of people outside Israel's family line who had a relationship with God, such as Job or Jethro, Moses' father-in-law. However, this explanation struggles with the supernatural, almost cosmic language used to describe Melchizedek in the New Testament. After all, no other human, no matter how good, is described as without beginning of days, or as one who remains a priest forever. This lifts Melchizedek beyond the level of a simply devout man. These three theories try to understand a figure who seems to exist between worlds. He has human qualities but acts like an eternal being. He exists in history but operates with end times authority. Perhaps this is exactly where his greatest mystery lies. Melchizedek may have been placed in history not to be fully understood, but to raise questions that can only be answered in light of something greater, or someone yet to come. The discovery of the Dead Sea Scrolls did more than recover ancient texts. It opened a door to the hidden religious world of Jewish groups during the Second Temple period. And no figure emerges with more mystery from these forgotten scrolls than Melchizedek. In Essene circles, he wasn't just a memory from Genesis. He was a central figure loaded with expectation, seen as an agent of end times redemption, working directly in the final war between light and darkness. The most fascinating aspect of the Qumran texts is how the Essenes viewed Melchizedek with an authority that rivaled God himself. He was credited with freeing captives, announcing forgiveness in the year of Jubilee, and judging spiritual enemies, roles which in the Bible belong only to the Messiah or to God. This elevation of such a mysterious character to the level of a heavenly judge reveals something important. There was a spiritual and mystical line of thought among the Jews that went far beyond what the biblical books officially recorded. The Essenes didn't write carelessly. Every name, every prophecy, every symbolic figure was carefully preserved. And Melchizedek was among their most revered figures. They believed he would lead the final battle against Belial, the spirit of darkness, acting as God's justice bringer in the end times. For this group, Melchizedek didn't belong to the past. He was waiting for his moment to reappear. That changes everything. It shows that in the religious imagination of the time, Melchizedek was more than a character from long ago. He was a figure expected in the future. This contrast between the Bible's view, where he appears only in Genesis, Psalms, and Hebrews, and the mystical version found in the Qumran scrolls shows that there were parallel hidden traditions that treated Melchizedek as a divine being active in humanity's spiritual history. What if these writings reflect not just speculation, but fragments of an older tradition intentionally forgotten? Could we be facing an attempt to preserve a revelation that was silenced over the centuries? Or did the Essenes know something we're still trying to understand? Melchizedek in the caves of Qumran isn't merely a symbolic figure. He is a sacred name, an apocalyptic hope, and perhaps one of the lost keys to unlocking the mystery between heaven and earth. If Melchizedek's identity is wrapped in mystery, perhaps the key lies where few look, in the meaning of his very name. In Hebrew, Melchizedek comes from two words, Melech, king, and Tzedek, righteousness, meaning king of righteousness. This is a powerful title full of symbolism, especially for a character who appears without introduction, without origin, and disappears shortly after his brief appearance. But the puzzle goes deeper. He's also called King of Salem. Beyond being considered the early form of Jerusalem, Salem comes from the root shalom, which means peace. This means his two main titles form a unique identity. King of righteousness and King of peace. These aren't just descriptions, they're divine qualities. In Scripture, righteousness and peace are attributes that flow directly from God. To see these two concepts united in a single human figure in a time before the law and priesthood raises an inevitable question. Was he a symbolic king, or the living embodiment of those attributes? For ancient Middle Eastern peoples, names weren't just labels. They carried essence, purpose, identity. Melchizedek's name doesn't merely describe his role, it seems to point to his essential nature. And when you add that he's also a priest, a role that should require family lineage and formal consecration, the mystery only deepens. The name, the title, the city, and his actions. Everything about him is too symbolic to be accidental. Everything seems designed to point to something greater than the character himself. Perhaps the name Melchizedek isn't merely a historical name, but a hidden declaration left to be unveiled in future times. Based on everything we've examined, the most reasonable conclusion is that Melchizedek was a pre-earthly heavenly being, not an ordinary angel, not just a king, but a visible and temporary manifestation of supreme spiritual authority. He may have been a theophany of the Son of God, an appearance of Christ before his human birth, revealed in a mysterious form with a specific purpose, to leave an eternal model of righteousness and peace, the pattern of the true high priest who would come centuries later. The very text of Hebrews seems careful to say he was made like the Son of God, indicating that Melchizedek is more than a symbol, but less than the full manifestation of the incarnate Christ. Our theory, therefore, is that he was a heavenly projection, a real pre-manifestation of the eternal Messiah, sent to mark a point in history and leave a pattern that would echo across thousands of years. Melchizedek is the bridge, the living shadow, heaven's password, disguised as an earthly king. He was not Shem, he was not merely a righteous man, and it was no accident that he appeared exactly when and where he did. He was an echo of the eternal, whispering the name of the one who would come with power, blood, and salvation. The story of Melchizedek reminds us that the Bible contains depths we've barely begun to explore. Mysteries that span from Genesis to Revelation, connecting dots across thousands of years. This shadowy king-priest stands as one of Scripture's most fascinating puzzles. He appears for just a moment, yet his significance echoes through the centuries. He offers bread and wine, foreshadowing communion. He blesses Abraham, demonstrating superior authority. He carries titles that point to Christ himself. Was he an angel, a pre-incarnate appearance of Jesus, a righteous king chosen to play a symbolic role? The debate continues, but one thing is certain: Melchizedek matters. His brief appearance carries weight far beyond its brevity. If this journey through ancient mystery has stirred your mind and sparked your curiosity, you're in the perfect place for more discoveries. Hit the like button to help others find this video. Share it with friends who love biblical mysteries, and subscribe to Grohl's channel. Turn on notifications so you won't miss our upcoming explorations of forgotten characters, hidden texts, and surprising revelations. The ancient world still has many secrets to share.